The date was Monday, February 24th, and in the early evening, I had just kind of wrapped the show. It was just after 5:30 p.m., to be precise. I received a very strange message from a friend of mine. I'm not going to identify that friend, but the message specifically read, "Hey, I have something to tell you from the White House. They asked me to call you. I'm just the messenger here." Again, strange. I'm just the messenger here, like kind of removing themselves from whatever was going to be said. So I assume it's got to be something weird. And I say, yeah, whatever. Give me a call.
In the middle of all the chaos surrounding Candace Owens right now, especially after her shocking claims about the French presidential couple, there's one strange detail that almost everyone missed. After rewatching one of her old episodes, it's clear that something huge slipped through the cracks, and it changes how we see everything. Candace mentioned something very specific this week. She revealed that months ago, Charlie Kirk was the one who personally called her and told her to stop talking about Brigitte Macron. That single call changes the entire timeline of their relationship. Here's why it matters. People online have been swearing up and down that Candace and Charlie hadn't been friends for years. But that phone call totally proves otherwise. They were still in contact. And more than that, it sounds like they were still close enough for Charlie to warn her directly. Now going back and listening to the way Candace first described that call, it feels completely different once you realize it was Charlie on the other end. Suddenly her tone, her pauses, even the way she explained it all makes a lot more sense now. And just to be clear, this isn't about pushing any accusations. This is my interpretation of her own story based on public info she's already shared. You can make your own judgment and theories in the comments, but for now, let's revisit that specific podcast episode she dropped back in June where she explained what really went down back in February 2025, long before we even knew that her mysterious friend was actually Charlie Kirk when Candace said, "I'm just a messenger."
So he does call me pretty immediately, by the way, and he says, somebody very high up at the White House has asked me to ask you if, as a favor, you could stop speaking about Brigitte Macron.
That tiny phrase could mean a lot of things. Maybe Charlie didn't even agree with whoever told him to make that call. Or maybe he added that line on purpose, almost like a safety note. Something he could point to later if things ever got serious between Candace, Brigitte, and the people behind the scenes. It would show he wasn't part of the plan, just the one passing along the message. But here's where things get even more interesting. Candace described it like he called her as a favor, but a favor for who? That question changes everything. Was it something done out of loyalty to powerful connections or simply a way to calm things down between friends? The way she tells it, it sounds like it was personal, not some big official move. That's why this whole moment felt so real. You can actually hear the difference between talking to a casual friend and someone who's been through everything with you. With a regular friend, you'd keep things polite. Please have a seat. Want something to drink? But with a real friend, it's totally different. You just say, get your own drink. Or laugh it off because you don't have to pretend. That raw, familiar tone says it all. It wasn't business. It was personal. And when Candace added that he was very good to me in the past, that was her subtle way of protecting him. She didn't name him directly, probably to avoid drawing attention. After all, back then...
Excuse me? I'm not kidding when I say that in the myriad of possibilities that were floating through my brain about what this phone call was going to be about, that was not one of them. So I'm just kind of having to redirect, and I'm going, oh, what are you talking about? To be clear, we had, ironically, as a podcast, we had just ended our Brigitte Macron series 4 days earlier on February 20th. That's when we released the last episode, which was the epilogue. So I'm going, that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting this phone call now? And obviously I asked.
Everyone saw Charlie constantly in political circles and big events. So if she'd said too much, people would have figured it out instantly. It's almost like she went out of her way to use calm, careful language just to keep his name out of the spotlight because deep down she knew exactly how fast the internet would connect the dots. She definitely can't call herself a small podcaster anymore. She's #1 in the world now and everyone knows it. The way she imitated Charlie's tone during that story was so intense you could almost hear his voice in your head saying those exact words. It sounded serious, like something he genuinely believed needed to be said. And to be fair, some of Candace's questions back then did sound like things any curious person might ask, especially given the strange details she claimed to uncover about Brigitte and her family. She talked about how the official story of the chocolatier from Amy didn't add up, saying the city was bombed during World War II, so the original bakery couldn't have survived as claimed. Then she pointed to records showing that after the war, a family with a similar name from Bamberg, Germany had been relocated to Amiens as refugees, including one person named Renee. That discovery made her wonder if the family's roots were actually German, not French, as people had long believed. It all tied into a theory she discussed later in August, where she mentioned hearing claims that some people from that era might have been moved under a classified relocation effort. But even then, Candace made it clear she hadn't confirmed anything. She was just investigating, digging, asking questions that powerful people didn't want her asking.
For a little more information, I say, who specifically called you? And that friend of mine says, it's somebody that has the president's ear. This is somebody important. So I'm thinking, okay, this is Pfizer, Susie Wiles, I don't know. And I tell my friend, go back to that person and just say I said no. It's free speech. This is obviously an important story to me. The implications here are pretty severe about what I've uncovered, so no deal.
She even mentioned that one of Brigitte's lawsuits oddly referenced MK Ultra multiple times, even though Candace's only original comment was that Brigitte's listed birthday happened to match the program's start date. It was a strange detail that made everything sound even more confusing. Basically, her argument was simple. The deeper she dug, the less sense the official story made, and the stronger the pressure became for her to stop. Whether those claims ever proved true or not, the whole thing plays out like a political thriller. So, when we circle back to that phone call, Charlie's tone feels even more mysterious. He wasn't giving her much detail at all, which could mean two things. Either he genuinely didn't know the full reason behind the message, or maybe, just maybe, he thought he was protecting her from something bigger. Candace revealed that Charlie had told several people just weeks, even days before his tragic passing, that they were coming after him. But who exactly were they? That's the question that still sends chills. Could it have been connected to the same people who wanted Candace to stop digging into Brigitte's story? Some think it's far-fetched. Others say it's worth asking, but either way, it's wild to even imagine. Now, of course, Candace herself admitted she was only speculating when she said it. She wasn't presenting proof, just following the strange trail of coincidences that kept piling up. She made it clear she's not accusing anyone, just analyzing what she called one of the most unbelievable and twisted political mysteries of our time. And then came the real bombshell. She later suggested that the person behind that tense phone call might have been Sergio Gore. She claimed he was fired up during the conversation.
I go into my husband's office and I tell him what just happened. And honestly, I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity of it because I hadn't thought beyond what may have happened. And then I do what I always do just in case. I call Noah, I call the lawyer, and I'm like, hey, I know Macron's, sending us legal letters. Just want you to add this onto the pile that somebody at the White House is asking me to just stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. Cool. We kind of have a laugh about it, run it different ways. Are we going to expect something else to be delivered to my door? Another threat, implicit threat from the Macrons.
Practically demanding that she go along with what was being asked. But the part that really hit people was when Candace imitated Charlie's voice, repeating the words, "I didn't lie to you. I didn't lie to you." Her delivery was so specific, you could tell she wasn't just guessing. It sounded like she was channeling exactly how he said it. Maybe it's overreading. Maybe not. But something about that tone felt real. In the end, Candace said she ended the call herself because things were getting heated. She described the man's insistence, saying he kept repeating that it was supposedly coming from the highest level and that she should just do it. Whether you believe her or not, that whole moment shows how much pressure she was under at the time and how determined she was to stand her ground even while pregnant. Candace later explained that after hanging up the phone, she just sat there in complete silence trying to process what had happened. Imagine getting a call like that from someone you trusted only for it to turn into a demand wrapped in confusion. She said her first thought was disbelief. Why would Charlie of all people be mixed up in this? But then the shock gave way to something even heavier fear. Because if what she suspected was true, it meant the situation wasn't just about gossip or rumors anymore. There were powerful people involved. And the moment she refused to play along, everything changed. She started noticing strange patterns online. Accounts that used to support her suddenly went silent. Others began posting coordinated comments attacking her credibility, calling her unstable and obsessed. It felt orchestrated. And yet, Candace stayed online, stayed vocal, and didn't back down. She claimed that once Charlie was gone, she understood the full gravity of that phone call, that he might have been trying to warn her, not threaten her.
Somebody calling in a favor, who knows, whatever. Anyways, we do dinner. And I am kind of feeling bad about my pregnant attitude on the phone call, because I was, 8 weeks away from birth. And I was a bit shorter on the phone than I would have been if there wasn't like a growing infant foot that's lodged under my lung. And this person has been very good to me in the past. And so I resolved that before I go to bed, I'll phone him back and have a much more calm conversation. Not that I was rude, but just like, hey, what's this actually about? And so I did.
Hoping someone would pick up on the real warning beneath his words. In later interviews, Candace admitted she replayed that call in her head for months. The tone, the pacing, the hesitation, it all stuck with her. And when she compared it to his last few public appearances, she noticed the same thing. A man who looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't. Some people online argue she's reading too much into it. Others say it makes perfect sense. After all, if someone was pressuring him to silence a friend, that alone would weigh on anyone's conscience. Add to that the stress of leading a massive organization and being constantly watched, and you can see why his final days might have been full of unease, but here's where it gets even darker. A journalist from an independent outlet reportedly reached out to Candace, claiming they were investigating connections between several media consultants, foreign lobbyists, and political figures tied to that same issue she'd been digging into. According to the journalist, they'd received anonymous tips suggesting that her February call wasn't random at all. Apparently, certain communications between European and US-based PR agencies were flagged months before the controversy went public. Emails allegedly referenced reputation management campaigns targeting problematic narratives spreading on social media. It sounds technical, but what it really means is that there might have been organized efforts to shut down discussions exactly like the one Candace was having. When Candace heard about that, she reportedly said it gave her chills because it aligned perfectly with how quickly she was pressured to stop, how many doors closed on her, and how Charlie's tone shifted from firm to fearful. It's like he wanted to say more but couldn't risk it. Then there's the Sergio Gore angle. The man Candace now believes was involved in that original call. She described him as being intense, even aggressive about getting her to complain.
To end the Russian and Ukrainian war, unless you stop speaking about his wife. I'm just going, what? What are you saying? What are we even speaking about? What do you mean negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? I'm just like, looking into a story at my house. I've got a very small team here, and you're telling me that somehow negotiations are being held up and it needs to be communicated to me that I gotta stop talking about Brigitte? What are we saying? And then I'm asking myself in my mind, because I hang up this phone and I am in true shock. Did Emmanuel Macron pretend to fly into DC under the guise?
Some have pointed out that Sergio had connections to multiple public figures and communication firms that specialize in crisis control. Again, nothing proven, but when you line up the timing, the overlap is impossible to ignore. Still, Candace tried to be careful in her retelling. She never claimed that Charlie was part of anything malicious. In fact, she insisted the opposite, that he was used. He was trying to protect me, she said, and you could hear the sadness behind her words. Whether or not that's true, her belief adds another emotional layer to an already complicated story. And why did it seem like everyone involved wanted the conversation buried as soon as it happened? Even now, months later, the internet is still divided. Some think Candace is exaggerating for attention, while others believe she's inching closer to the truth. Either way, her story has forced people to ask uncomfortable questions about influence, loyalty, and silence. Because at the end of the day, whether you believe her theories or not, it's hard to deny that something strange happened in those final weeks. Too many coincidences, too many people suddenly going quiet, and too many unanswered questions hanging in the air. If Charlie really was caught between doing what he was told,